It's like in between.
In between, that's absolutely what we are. Either we're a good show, we're a bad show, or we're something in between. But happy Saturday and welcome to the Northland Sports Page. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis. Happy Saturday. It looks like it's going to be a gorgeous Saturday. Guys, I love doing this show. The one problem with today is keeps us inside for a couple hours at least. But this does continue to be therapeutic during the COVID era. Tell you what, guys, though, so does warm weather. We got it today.
Yeah, it's about time, huh? We've kind of earned this. It went away from winter pretty quick, but it didn't change between 30 and 41 degrees for what seems like the entirety of the COVID impact.
Yeah, this weather forecast for today looks fantastic. It's nice to see things switching around a little bit, and that little bit of rain we got yesterday seems to be starting to green things up as well. It's always a fun sign of spring.
Absolutely. The calendar says late March is spring. Maybe Duluth says, well, basically May 1st or May 2nd, as the case may be. Does that help you guys at all? Because a lot of the reactions to the stay-at-home order in Minnesota extended, I wasn't surprised, but I feel like everybody's just a little more edgy now because they're ready to be done with this. It's nicer out. That increases being ready to be done with this. But for me, having it be nicer out, okay, you want me to stay at home? No big deal. I'm just going to stay outside.
Yeah, no, I agree with the part about people finally starting to get super antsy about this. I think it was understood before. I think there's a large percentage of people are starting to gnash a little bit. Although I do think the golfers have to be happy with this. They got free the golfers last week, and now they got almost perfect golfing weather.
It is look great for golfing outside right now. I know that it's a different experience. I did go do the COVID-19 style golfing last week. It's definitely different not being able to enter clubhouses and things like that, and socially distancing and not touching the tees and no rakes in the bunkers or anything like that. But it's nice to get outside and feel some normalcy throughout this as well.
Toph, can you have a one-person scramble start, shotgun start?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Every time you golf by yourself, it's a one-person
One
scramble.
person, yeah, exactly. It's a shotgun start every time.
Well, I was just wondering.
There we go.
If you're social distancing and you're playing best ball, does that mean you can just walk around and if you find somebody else's, go, that looked like a good shot, I'm going to go ahead and hit that one. This guy's not around to find out anyway.
I'll tell you what, Toph, that'd be a great thing. Yeah, I just got done with a 9-hole best ball. I did pretty good.
Yeah, I got an ace. I got an ace on 16, but it was my turn to play 17. No big deal.
Yep, I won the best ball tournament. You should get a trophy. We should get Topher a little what we got the best ball tournament 2020 COVID Open, Topher Davis.
We already
I'm still waiting
Topher.
for my.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we're going the same spot here because we already owe Topher the fantasy football trophy. You see the trophy and the jersey behind him. There should be one more of fresh kicks on his mantle. There should be a fantasy football trophy up there. Steve Patosha put a great one together. I just hope we have fantasy football to play next fall because I don't know where you guys are at in terms of hope and belief that sports will resume and when it'll be. I hate to say this, but I'm pretty much resorting to, well, football might start close to on time. The rest, see you next year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a little worried about that, Brian. I think you're right. I think that they're going to try with baseball. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I do think they're going to try something. And it sounds like hockey is getting more and more serious about doing something later in the summer or the fall anyway to finish the season up.
I agree that it feels like baseball's the one sport where they're going to try to do something, and that's part of, just because it's the one that was just about to start when this thing really hit, and they've got, summers, and they're trying to figure out whether to use spring training facilities to get that set up, if it's just a less travel from their home team, that 3-division thing they were talking about. And I think they're trying to figure out some way, even if it's just getting the games on TV, because that TV revenue might be enough to help keep it afloat for a while longer. And they're trying to do everything they can. And baseball's going right now in Taiwan with no fans, and they're trying to figure it out. And the Korean baseball leagues, I think, are getting rolling as well. So there's a precedent kind of out there.
I think that's it. Go ahead, Dave.
How about the thing we saw the other day where this is the first April since 1875 without Major League Baseball?
That's incredible. I mean, when you think about how long that was, and that's through the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, 1919. So it's a different world.
World Wars.
Well, and guys, to think about how long that's been, even the Chicago Cubs have won the World Series twice now since then. How's that for a long era in there as well?
Here, for history buffs, the president in 1875, I believe, was Ulysses S. Grant.
I think that's correct. The Civil War was over, and Ulysses S. Grant was now president of the United States. So
Yeah, Civil
be
War was
careful.
10 years in the rearview mirror. 10 years.
Exactly. I don't want to get in any kind of political lane, but be careful disclosing that information in the next briefing we get from the White House. Donald Trump will put himself on par with Ulysses Grant. Now, forget the only commonality will be the no baseball part, but he will say that he's going to go down in history with Ulysses S. Grant. And I'm, again, staying out of a political lane. I just don't want to hear that.
You know, the funny part, they say humor is based in truth. That's what makes it funny. Yeah, is that impossible to see? No, I could see something like that. And we were both really, really good. Really good. Really good presidents.
Yes, they both
The
did it
best.
bigly. They both eventually freed citizens of this country. We eventually got out of
Oh,
lockdown here versus the Civil War. That'll be the next comparison. I got to get
yep.
out of this topic before I'm
Yep. We
swimming
could
in
go down
waters
this
that
rabbit hole.
nobody will throw me a life preserver. I see Topher over there laughing, but he's on mute, so nobody can hear it. So what about the classic broadcast? Because those continue. I'm done. I look at, classic baseball, classic hockey, classic hardwood classics for the NBA, classic even Masters, what have you. I can't do it anymore. I need the real thing. It's lost its luster. And video game sports, awesome to play, the stupidest thing to watch, my opinion.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything else to add. I agree. I'm glad that they're there for people who can watch things they've already seen before with rapt engagement, but I can't do it. So yeah, no, I'm with you. I like the simulations, but
Yeah.
I like the results, not necessarily watching it as it happens.
Well, I'll tell you what, I like watching baseball, and I understand people that don't. But I tried to watch the MLB Network, the video game thing with Trevor May representing the Twins. And it is, it looks close to the eye to a baseball game. It looks like what you would see if you're watching a baseball game on TV. But the second I realized, well, it's not like it dawned on me, but the second it, registers that you're watching a video game, I was like, this is god awful. This is terrible. Watching players react to playing video games at any sport is bad. The basketball is okay. Hockey would probably be the best because hockey video games are on another level in sports. Baseball sucked, man, and I was looking forward to at least trying it. It was awful.
Yeah, the only video game I've ever been able to watch with somebody else is when Aaron was playing Skyrim, because at least there was a story. The sports video games to watch somebody else play, all you really want to do is correct them. When Trevor May throws high heat and it's hit, you're like, slider away. What are you doing?
Well, and what it made me think, and Toph, I don't know about you, but it made me think about when I had slumber parties as a kid and we would watch or play video games in big groups. Obviously, you spent some time watching because only two players could go at the same time. And at that age, it didn't seem like a big deal to watch people play video games. I'm doing it now going, how did I ever do this? How bored was I? The only video game for me, looking back now, that was fun to watch was Duck Hunt because I like to see if people were cheating or not. Did you actually shoot from a distance or did you take your gun, press it up to your screen, and do it that way?
Yeah, it's the watching video games is something that I've never been able to get into. Obviously, e-gaming is something that's allegedly catching on a little bit more, but the sports games, it's the graphics are pretty amazing now. They look like, you mentioned, if you're just looking through channels, it can look like something's going on. I know that even crazier, Fox has been airing NASCAR races with simulators every Sunday.
Right.
And as I flip through channels, I'm like, oh, it looks like a NASCAR race is on, and they're guys in their living rooms with simulators, and it's a video game, and it looks pretty crazy. But it's, NASCAR is not something I'm ever going to sit and watch at any point, really, anyway. But for some people, it's really interesting. But yeah, watching other players get into it, I know it does take you back. I mean, when you mentioned younger, going on hockey tournaments and taking the N64 on the road and having it plugged into the hotel room and having a whole team in there for a bond tournament, and you're watching other people play. But part of that, you're in the room and you know the guys and you can razz them a little bit, right?
Right.
You don't know Trevor May. You can't, like Dave's saying, you can't, give him heat for throwing the wrong pitch at that particular time and things like that. So I don't know. It feels like anything anybody's doing to help them pass the time during this, I'm all for. By all means, as long as you're staying home, staying safe, and doing everything we have to do properly, that do what you got to do, I guess. But for me personally, no.
So the classic games are getting tougher to stay with. but they're going a little bit deeper because I saw two Major League Baseball All-Star games that took place in Minnesota this week alone. I saw 1965 and 1985. Both were fun because they were good trips down memory lane. 65 was ridiculous because you look at the lineups and you're going, wow. You
Yep.
talk about simulations, Dave. Those were the lineups of what you want to simulate now.
Yeah, those all-star teams back in the 50s and 60s, it was Hall of Fame leader off. Each team had 5 Hall of Famers, 6 Hall of Famers. The pitching staffs were all guys that are either in or borderline. Yeah, those years were fun. Those years were fun to watch and fun to read about. Watch in recorded later because I didn't actually see them live, but I read a lot about them and listen to Dad and his buddies talk about them.
Well, how about just 65 alone? Willie Mays leads off that game with a home run. Nobody's surprised that Willie Mays hit a home run. But let me say again, Willie Mays leads off that game. Willie Mays is your leadoff hitter. Hello, lineup.
No doubt. No doubt. You can't argue with those type. I mean, that's why when the old timers see the All-Star game and it's filled with guys who have had a really good first half of their season on their second year when they were bad the first year, and you got a relief pitcher whose ERA is 2, but he's popular. You got his middle reliever, the Mark Eichhorn type guys who are
that is a great pull.
Game.
That's a fabulous pull.
And the old timers are used to Willie Mays leading off because the 3-hitter is Hank Aaron, right? So I get when you argue when you argue with the old timers about not understanding why they don't like when they don't like guys and middle relievers in the All-Star game because they don't belong there. That's because when they were growing up, it was Willie Mays leading off in front of Hank Aaron.
That's the best pull that Dave Cook has in 2.5 years on this show. Mark Eichhorn. I was going to go maybe Rick Honeycutt, but wow, Mark Eichhorn is well done. But Dave, you mentioned it. These are guys we heard about. Finally get to see a little bit of it.
Yeah, and I think they played a little bit of that old home run derby game. That would be something that we could watch right now, and they could do social distancing. Is having 2 guys and a pitcher home run battle off. You could do that in one weekend. You could bring 10 guys to a stadium someplace with a pitching machine and have a home run derby. At least it's live sport, right?
Well, and I still think football could get involved. I'm taking a shot at one of Topher's favorites because of where he went to school, but my favorite tweet that continues to live on is, you could do something with a passing competition in football because Xavier Rhodes was way ahead of his time with social distancing. He stayed way more than 6 feet away from the intended target. You could do something, could you?
Well, Brian, we talked about years ago.
Crickets on that one.
Right. We talked years ago about our favorite quarterback who gets overlooked is Jeff George, right? When I first realized how much I liked Jeff George is because his arm strength was ridiculous because they had the quarterback competitions. And I saw Jeff George throw the ball through a moving target at 60 yards from his backside because that was his trick shot, was sitting down and throwing the ball that far. You can do that. The guys don't have to be around each other, but they can be on the same field.
I like that. And the love fest or love affair for Jeff George that is here on the Northland Sports page continues. Dave and I will always have that. Funny you brought him up because I actually did watch him yesterday because I can't do classic games anymore. I can't sit through the whole game, but I can always pick moments. And so what I'm doing instead of trying to time watching the TV perfectly, I'm watching like the 10-minute highlight films of certain games going, oh yeah, I remember that. That I can still do. 10 minutes, I'll give you. 3 hours, I can't. Toph, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think part of what the classic game stuff right now, too, is the fact that for Minnesota sports, there's only a certain number of games that are classics, right, that we would think are fun to watch and are classic for us. And over the last, 4 or 5 weeks, those have been run out already. They've been playing them down. So now we're getting to trying to find something that's more interesting, and whether it's watching Seattle come back and beat the Packers in an NFC Championship game, trying to find right, exactly. That's trying to find something else of interest because the World Series games have been played, the Wild's long run's been played, the Timberwolves run to the Western Conference Finals been played.
When you've only got one, I mean, Timberwolves.
Right.
I'm actually surprised, and I don't mean to knock the Timberwolves because I love basketball more than most, but I'm actually surprised at the number of classics that they've come up with. For me, when I see that on the TV guide that there's going to be a Timberwolves classic that night, I'm most intrigued as to, well, what did they pick? Because like Topher said, 2004, they did it already. What else is left? and all of a sudden you get games where Kelvin Martin helped beat the Lakers, and I'm going, oh yeah, that kind of deep dive I guess I appreciate, because Topher's right. Now you have to think about something other than the obvious.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if you legitimately said how many games outside of 2004 could be considered classics. So I suppose Kevin Love's three-pointer from a distance. I don't remember who they were playing, but that play.
I think it was Sacramento, but I could be wrong. I know it was out west because I didn't see it live because I fell asleep.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Butler game against Denver. I mean, I guess I wonder where the first game in franchise history is at Metrodome would be in that list. It would be in the top 10 because there's just not that many.
Right. Well, and as much as he was a flash in Minnesota, Derrick Rose scoring 50. You hear that at some point?
Yep.
You know, who was the other point guard? Wasn't it Mo Williams, the guard who scored 50 for this team?
Oh my gosh!
People forget he was even on the team, but you could air that too.
Yep, 100%. That's actually a really good example of what we're talking about, is finding those classic games. You're kind of beating the bushes a little bit. Maybe they could bring out classic players and run some junior rider stuff out there.
There you go, J.R. Rider. That's what they need to do. Maybe they need to do classic highlights of and pick a player each day of the week in different sports. That would be interesting, because then maybe you do get to see more of the players you didn't, which is what we wanted to talk about today. You know, we're all of different ages and different eras of watching sports. Whose career, as you look at classics that you didn't get to see, do you wish you would have? And you can start with whatever sport you'd like.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because there's so many angles to the question. That question is super nuanced. Like, I would love to see, because I enjoyed this pitcher, but I would love to have seen him grow from a younger age, and that's Oil Can Boyd. I don't remember if you remember Oil Can Boyd.
Oh, yeah. He was the number 2 starter on the 86 Sox, I believe.
He was skinny. He was goofy. He threw 19 different pitches.
Toph, he was a Northern Leaguer, was he not?
Yeah, he ended up with the Sioux City Explorers. I got to know him a little bit there. He's an interesting old dude at that point. It was it was fun to watch him pitch.
But there's a lot of guys who pitched. You know, they didn't just throw hard. They didn't just have 3 pitches. They had about a dozen pitches that they could throw anytime. You know, you got Pascual Perez, if you remember that. If you remember, like, Louis Tiant could do that. David Cohn could do that. Those type of pitchers, I would love to be able to have a closer connection with their career, to see the thought process when you come to finding the next pitch or creating something out of nothing. So any one of those guys that really worked the craft, it would be fun to follow their career closer.
So, Toph, it looks like we're starting with baseball. What I love what Dave did just there is he said there's so many angles to the question. So what he did was he completely cheated and disregarded it. Because the question was, whose career that you didn't see would you have liked to? He just went and said, well, here's everybody I saw. I just wish I could have studied it closer.
Yeah,
so we can do that too. But Topher, what do you got? Let's stick with baseball.
Well, I think it's interesting. Dave actually got me thinking a little bit when he brought up Oil Can Boyd in the Northern League. It made me immediately think of Mike Cuellar, a guy that you and I got to know, Brian, as in his next life as a pitching coach, and never got to see him pitch in person. And to hear him talk later about the art of pitching, I wish I would have been able to witness him in person, throw that legendary screwball and see how it really worked, and to see how good those Orioles rotations were back then with all those 20-game winners. And it's just something like that. And even, the Dodgers rotations with Drysdale and Koufax, and to be able to see those guys pitch, I mean, when really be able to the art of pitching, I think, is something that's baseball's one where, I mean, we talked about eras before, and being able to see individual players of certain eras before our time is be something that, and then baseball's got such a big history for me. It's one that you could just pick anyone. I'd be interested in that, and I would definitely get locked in.
Yeah, that's exactly it. As we did the era discussion last week, and this is kind of the follow-up of, are there individuals that make the era? And some of this we probably alluded to last week, but it is, again, I go back to the mythical creatures, Dave, 27 Yankees, where you go Gehrig and Ruth, etc. I always talk about them among the all-timers, but I know nothing about what they actually did in terms of seeing it.
Yep. I think a guy that comes to mind when we talk that way is Roberto Clemente, because whenever we hear about Roberto Clemente, it's great arm, philanthropist, right? But if you talk to people that watched him, he was in the same breath with Mays and Aaron and that group, his Mantle. But they never talk about it that way. You know, he got to 3,000 hits. In my mind, he's mythical like Puckett will be in years.
Right.
You know, we talk about big moments and all that, but if you look at his numbers were good. I would love to have seen what when people say Mays, Merritt, or Mays, Mantle, Clemente, I want to know why he's in there. I want to see why he's in that group.
Right, that's a great point. And even just the names you put in front of Clemente, those were guys I would list too. You know, Henry Aaron, I just missed. I think he was done in 76. I'm born in 79. Mays, I always say he's either second best or right in the best player ever conversation with Ruth. And it's because I've basically been told that by everything that I've seen or heard. And that's watching old footage. I know nothing about what Willie Mays did. If not for Topher, I'd probably forget that he was a Met at one time. But Willie Mays, again, is one of those kind of mythical creatures.
Agreed, 100%. That's exactly what we're talking about. Those guys that we've read about and heard about. You know, somebody like Hack Wilson, who has, you know, one of the most difficult records of all time to reach. You know, it would be interesting to see how in the world a one-hit wonder like that comes through, and you know what that looked like at that point when 5 foot nothing, was he 5'2" or 5'3", and he drove in almost over 160 runs, right? Over 160 runs, or was it 158? Anyway, it doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. It would be fun to
I was going to
see
say, I think it's close to, isn't it higher than that? Isn't it like in the 170s, 180s, 190? It's ridiculous, whatever he did.
Yep. And he was not built like Gehrig. You know, he was just a little guy.
What about a guy like Johnny Vandermeer, where the only reason every baseball fan knows him is because of what he did in back-to-back starts? Otherwise, his playing career was somewhat nondescript. Did he win 100-plus games? Yes, but he lost 2 more games than he won. But I would like to have seen the Johnny Vandermeer era just to be part of, you know, we make such a big deal out of anything we can in sports now because the availability to have your opinion on a platform is better than it's ever been. But I would have loved to have seen what's the Johnny Vandermeer discussion, because you want to talk about iconic accomplishments, at least people had to be beside themselves with what he was doing.
Yeah, and I'm not looking this up. I could be wrong. I also think he was a starting pitcher of the first night game ever. So I think that's right. I could absolutely be wrong about that. But yeah, back-to-back no-nos. How about Harvey Haddock's, the 12-inning no-hitter with Pittsburgh back in the day? I mean, some of those events, being at those singular events, rather than just solely somebody's career, a singular event would be cool as well. But following Bob Feller's career, coming from, you know, when he was 15, throwing into pros, 17 in the major leagues, striking out 20 guys when he was 18.
And I got one that seems like, you know, a little bit almost low-hanging fruit, but he's a guy that's talked about a lot because he's not a guy that, I mean, but Jackie Robinson, he's obviously known for breaking the color barrier, but you have to be a special player to be put in that position to know that you're going to be the guy that's going to you have to play at that level. And he earned his Hall of Fame rights every bit on the field, not for just the, you know, being the guy that break the color barrier. So being able to see someone like him play, I think would be a lot of fun as well.
So something that's amazing to me about Jackie Robinson is reading stuff. Baseball wasn't even his first or second best sport. Like, he was an All-American football player. He would be first-round NFL draft type player. And he was a very, very, very good basketball player. And
he was Dave Winfield way before Dave Winfield.
And he was also, if I remember right, his borderline Olympic track guy. I think his brother was even a better runner. And he started playing baseball in college. He was a 200 hitter. So he was self-made too. So Jackie breaking the color barrier obviously is historical in one of the seminal events in American history. But baseball wasn't his thing when he was younger. That's the part that I would love to follow is that growth as a baseball player.
Absolutely. And then you think of a lot of these guys that we didn't see, and a lot of the reasons that we know about their careers is, you know, we heard about it, we were told about it, maybe from older generations, or quite simply the back of a baseball card if you're lucky enough to have one. I want to go that direction because, Dave, you brought up Rogers Hornsby last week. It made me think of, and I don't know why, because I don't know how much of a link there would be, but immediately after you said Rogers Hornsby, I went to Honus Wagner. I didn't know anything about Honus Wagner except for when I was an avid baseball card collector and you couldn't wait to get the next month's Beckett with all your values for your cards. Talk about a mythical creature. If you had a Honus Wagner rookie card, you had value with dollar signs that I've never seen before.
My favorite Honus Wagner story, when I was growing up, talking to people my grandfather's age, the story about Honus Wagner was his hands were so big that when he played shortstop, when he'd barehand the ball, he would get all kinds of dirt as well. And so when he threw the ball, and he threw the ball as hard as anybody, it came out of a cloud. Which has, can you imagine being a first baseman, knowing somebody's going to throw like that, and you're not going to be able to pick it out of his hand?
Right? When he started with a hand story, I thought, oh boy, here goes everybody's Adrian Peterson story. My favorite Honus Wagner moment is when you shook his hand. Man, does he have big and strong hands. But no, that was better. I liked it.
Yeah, threw all the pebbles and dirt along with it.
So, guys, it seems like we could do baseball forever because the history is so rich. But so we stay within some time parameters, which we're loose with in this new YouTube format. Where do you want to go next? Football would be fun. Hockey would be fun. Basketball has a deep history, too. It's a matter of how much appreciation we as a group have for it. I'll let you guys steer the wheel here. Where do we want to go next?
Toph, I'll let you pick.
If that's the case, then we're going to, go to hockey. And I'm going to, obviously I got to see the end of Wayne Gretzky's career, but I didn't get to see as much of the beginning, born in 84. And that's, he was rolling in the early 70s and being able, or the late 70s, being able to see him, I mean, the greatest player of all time. I think being able to see him more would be something amazing. Obviously, being able to see Bobby Orr, that was, in Boston. I stole Brian's Boston thunder there.
Topher is laughing at me because I just gave him a hand signal as though I have nothing to say now. Because ironically, Bobby Orr finished, I believe, in 78. Yours truly is born in 1979. Maybe I wouldn't have taken as much heat for being a Boston guy. I would have saw Bobby Orr even at the end. Just had him from the get-go of my life.
Yeah, and I don't know how many games we're watching, in the crib necessarily either. But Bobby Orr would be the stories about him and how good he was before the knee injuries got him. I think would be really amazing to see.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good one, Toph. So this one is more visual for me because I remember being little and having the picture, the posters and stuff, right? Because you didn't get to see the NHL quite like you do today. And the two guys who I always tried to model my game after were Mike Bossy, because he had the flow, the Islanders goal scorer. But Guy Lafleur, the Flower, when I started really watching, right? So he didn't wear a helmet. So when I was watching the pictures that I had, the posters that I had, always has the hockey hair, right? But when he got older, he wasn't wearing a helmet, but he had lost a lot of his hair. And I remember how disappointed I was. I was like, really? The posters lied to me because that is not what I want to look like. Now, of course, I've got that hair, but watching Guy Lafleur play when he was the best player in the NHL, or any, frankly, Jacques Lemaire and that whole Canadiens dynasty for about 15 years there.
There's no doubt.
We read about it, but it would have been fun to see it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have to dig a little deeper because Topher took my apparent low-hanging fruit with Bobby Orr. But picking Esposito. Phil Esposito for me was just an answer to a lot of trivia questions. He did play until I was 2, but like Topher said, in the crib, I'm not seeing that. Dave, you had to see some of that because his career ended in 1981. I know you were very much into sports by then, I assume.
Yeah, the funny thing about Phil Esposito is my high school hockey coach used to grab me by the jersey and say, "You're 6'2", you need to play Phil Esposito hockey," which meant stand in front of the net and bang with people until the puck went in. So, but when you're right, I was into it, but he was old at that point. It would be like watching Willie Mays in 1972.
Right.
There was still, you could see the talent and you knew the stories, but what I see in front of me doesn't equal.
Well, and the other guy for me, speaking of old, because he was done, I believe, 20 years before I was born. But again, the answer to a hockey trivia question in my life, the Rocket. Maurice Richard is just a guy I've heard of, and I know the numbers. I don't know the career in visual form at all.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of hockey players that have Marcel Dion, ridiculous numbers, lot of stories, but not he's not first ballot inner ring Hall of Fame guy. So there's not even the amount of stories that you can get elsewhere. but people that watch him say, yeah, one of the most underappreciated goal scorers of all time.
Well, and if I was
Yeah,
going
and
to
I'm-
homer it, sorry, go ahead, Toph.
Oh yeah, I was gonna flip it a little bit and say Jacques Plante is someone that I would be interested in watching play a little bit as a goaltender, especially from an era when goaltending is completely different. They're even crazier then than I think they are now, and goalies are still pretty crazy now. I mean, going out there and sticking your face in front of pucks and revolutionizing the game, because he was one of the first guys to wear a mask, and that was by necessity because his face was getting so beat up. Yeah. So it's
pictures of Toe Blake. When you take pictures of Toe Blake and there's just pieces of his face missing, and now you watch how goalies play the game and they lean forward and you see them diving at pucks, and those old time goalies, they're just shaking their heads. They're like, okay, that's suicide, that's suicide, that's suicide. And now with the protective equipment, I agree. Wouldn't it be fun, Toph, to be in a bar with 7 or 8 of those old time goalies, just listen to their stories?
Oh, the stories would be absolutely incredible from those guys. The things they saw and the things that they don't remember because of some of those knocks to the head and all that fun stuff. Crazy.
Yep. Well, not to mention, just to simplify that statement, Dave started that with, wouldn't it be fun to be in a bar? In COVID-19 times, the answer is yes. But if I was going to homer it, we did a North Stars draft not too long ago. About half of the guys that we picked, at least 2 of us, didn't see. I mean, Bill Goldsworthy, Craig Hartsburg, I knew him, didn't see it. For Minnesota alone, this could be fun too.
Now I feel old.
Well, right.
Hartsburg is my wheelhouse.
But basically what it boils down to, I got into sports hardcore in 1986. In my life, that's still pretty early. I was turning 7. The North Stars were gone not long after that. So we love to talk about history. You can do it with the Wolves. You can do it with the Twins forever. You can do it with the Vikes forever. You go to the North Stars, I really had 5, 6, 7 years of awareness. That's not a lot.
Nope, it is not. That's correct. No, some of those guys from the North Stars you're talking about, it's like, God, you're tearing my heart out when you're talking about players that I was really attached to, and that's why when they left, I just disconnected the pro hockey period.
Well, and I learned more about Lou Nanne from the movie Miracle and from state hockey broadcasts than I did about him as a player at all. I knew I didn't want him in my draft, but I knew why. It had nothing to do with him on the ice.
Louis' mind for hockey, though, outside of his disinterest in anything north of 494, his mind, just listening to him talk about talk about trades or recruiting or play style or anything like that is he's just fascinating to listen to.
By the way, I talked about homering it in hockey. If I can back up and do it with baseball, obviously I have to pick Tony Oliva. Never saw an inning, but because of my dad, it's always been, who's your favorite Twin ever? Kirby Puckett. Who's your second? Tony Oliva. Why Tony Oliva? Because my dad said so. I would love to have at least seen it.
When he could run. That's what I'd love to see.
Well, a guy like me doesn't have any qualms if he can't, but that's different altogether.
Well, no, but that goes back to could steal a base anytime he wanted during a time in baseball when they didn't steal any bases.
True.
Mays, what they say, Willie Mays was 8 for 8 one year. Well, if you'd have given him 60 chances, how many bases would he have stolen?
It's a good point. Speaking of stealing, let's steal the idea and move it to football because, again, to homer the idea, it's really easy for me, and it might rip Dave's heart out a little bit, but, the Purple People Eaters, Fran Tarkenton, that's all mythical to me. Didn't see a minute of it. So I kind of want to go outside of Minnesota because it's too easy to go in. Do you guys have anybody that jumps off for you?
Well, it's funny, Brian, because the one guy that I would like to see local is Carl Eller. Because the Carl Eller I know was at the end of his career. And so when I was a kid, I saw Carl Eller as somebody who was in the way of the players that I wanted to see. So because I wanted to see the players I had seen in college or anything like that. And now, knowing what I know, I would have loved to see Carl Eller, the human wrecking machine, and been there to watch. Kind of like what you said with Tony Oliva. Do you really like Carl Eller? Why? Well, before I started watching football.
Right. We were told who to be interested in, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the name that jumps out to me is that I'm going even further back, and I know Brian didn't want to stay away from me keeping it one of us type thing, but I'm going hyper local here, Brian. I'm saying Ernie Nevers. Being able to see him play, and it's a completely different type of game, but I mean he's a Hall of Famer, and he played in Duluth and the NFL, and that still just is one of those things that I know the NFL wasn't what the NFL is now, but the fact that Duluth, Minnesota had a National Football League team, and at they beat the Green Bay Packers in a game, so that's always fun to bring up as well. So
then of course you can bring it up. Exactly. That's beautifully done on your part.
Thank you.
So you know what else, Brian, would be fun, Toph, would be watching some of those original throwing quarterbacks. So watching Norm Van Brocklin and watching Daryl LaMonica, the Mad Bomber, those guys that just, we weren't looking at completion percentages. We were just trying to keep the defense honest. And they'd go back, 7-8 yards and throw these gigantic punts in the air. And if they were good, like LaMonica and Van Brocklin, where all of a sudden, their offenses changed. It changed the whole style of football as we know it.
Wow, I love the LaMonica drop. That's just another one of those names that you didn't think would make this show, but that's a perfect point. What about the defenses back then versus now? Because again, just yesterday I watched football highlights of about 20 years ago. And that's long ago, but in my world that doesn't feel that long ago because I remember the results pretty much too well. But I'm looking at a lot of hits 20 years ago and I'm going, that probably would have been a flag today. If you watch 40, 50, 60 years ago, it definitely would have been a flag today. How bad would you want to see Lambert? How bad would you want to see Butkus? You could watch Nitschke. Somebody's going to get destroyed. I'm not necessarily big into violence, but it would be very different to see the game back then and realize what you're applauding versus, how they do it now.
It's such an interesting thing when it comes to football because so much of it is equipment based. Nitschke did blow people up, but he form tackled them, right? Because his face was going to get wrecked if he led with his head. And now, in the 80s and 90s, when ESPN started highlighting all the monster hits, those guys started leading with their head. Ditka made a point 15 years ago. If you want to stop concussions in football, take off the face masks. They're too beautiful. They're not going to want to lead with their head. But as you were talking, I was thinking of something that I saw. And Brian, you might have seen, and Toph, you're the guy who's just seen it in highlights, and that's that 85 Bears defense.
Oh yeah.
When they say the Bears defense,
Dan Hampton.
If you didn't see it, it's just a myth. Watching it, it was amazing. And the guy that I thought really made the difference is the one nobody talks about. And that's Wilbur Marshall.
Yeah.
I mean, they cut teams that when teams were running back, that was when the running offense was key. They shut running teams down, and then they blitzed the devil out of quarterbacks.
Right.
And
well, that was Buddy Ryan's, coming out party, if you will.
It was. They overloaded one side. They had with personality, right? Before then, you didn't see entire teams with personality like that. They were all like Walter Payton, who was a really good human being but didn't want to be in the front. That was when they brought video. I mean, that 85 Bears team changed, not just football, but the way I think they interacted with media.
Absolutely. And you're right about Wilbur Marshall. That's the name that doesn't get mentioned. You hear about Dan Hampton, Refrigerator Perry, Dave Duerson, Mike Singletary, probably Richard Dent. It's Wilbur Marshall's kind of the invisible man. He sure wasn't if you watch the games.
No, he was not. He was the guy that you had to account for.
Toph, what do you got? That's the only example that, well, there are, I guess, a few others, but that's one of the examples where I'm not that much older than you. But depending upon the time of our lives, I suddenly do feel like I am. But go ahead.
Yeah. The 85 Bears, I was definitely toddling around at that point and wasn't necessarily locked in. But it's a mythical team that you're right. Being able to go back and see them is something that would be, with full understanding of what was going on, would be pretty amazing as well. And I mean, I'm stuck in the really old school, I guess, but Bronco Nagurski is a mythical creature that I would love to. I mean, the International Falls Broncos are named after him,
right?
And that's just that's crazy to me.
And so many of those big names truly are mythical creatures. I mean, even Vince Lombardi, Bart Starr. As much as I don't like the history of that franchise from a fan base perspective, the players I respect, that's basically a myth to me.
Yeah, the guys that change the rules. Like Earl Campbell is the reason we don't have tearaway jerseys anymore.
Right.
You'd see highlights of him in Texas going up the sidelines, linebackers grabbing a hold of his jersey, just stripping right off. Or Brian Bosworth in the middle of the Oklahoma defense when he could play in college. making all the plays and then being like pro wrestling on the bit. I mean, those guys have changed rules. Those would be fun to watch as well.
You mentioned Earl Campbell changing the tearaway jerseys. Are you surprised that Troy Polamalu didn't force a hair length rule?
I do know that was talked about. You remember? And it was, who was the defensive end for Pittsburgh and then Green Bay? Kevin Green. Kevin Green was another guy. He had, his hair hung out the back across his nameplate.
Yeah, Kevin Green was a 3-4. He was a 3-4 giant. That was that Pittsburgh defense. Yes, he came to Green Bay, but in Pittsburgh, he and Greg Lloyd and that group, they were ridiculous.
Yep. But he was a guy that complained he got his hair jerked all the time. I can imagine the guys that were, 10 years older than I was, if you'd had long hair like that, they absolutely would have jerked on it. And if you complained, they'd have said, cut your hair, and walked away from you. They would have said, oh, I'm sorry. They'd said, yep, I pulled it. Cut it if you don't want me to do it.
All of a sudden, George Steinbrenner would have had to be the commissioner of football because he would have incorporated haircuts for everybody. The other guy that I would want to see, and it's a low-hanging fruit in terms of an obvious name, but Broadway Joe, because I've seen my share of prima donnas. T.O., Jim McMahon. I'd put Aaron Rodgers in that mix. Tom Brady's in that mix. A lot, Ocho Cinco near the top. When Broadway Joe was the jaw dropper for the media, I just want to see why.
Well, and look at his numbers. There's your bigger question. I mean, Broadway Joe's numbers aren't any good. I mean, if I remember right, he's either 500 when it comes to touchdowns, interceptions, or he's upside down.
Yeah, he's dare I say, and this will be Northland Sports Page preposterous statement material, but he's, dare I say, Trent Dilferish, that his name keeps popping up because he guaranteed a Super Bowl win and he got it. Otherwise, I put him right up there with Archie Manning as far as huge names that were not great quarterbacks.
Well, he's a little like Jim McMahon. I mean, Jim McMahon had the same style, right? The same personality, and his personality overran his performance a lot of the times.
Well, and you know what it is? It's basically another way of talking about Dennis Rodman. Good thing he was a tremendous rebounder because he didn't score, but we all knew who he was, and the personality was a big part of why.
Was that a segue? Because that was awesome.
It was. It was an easy little green light to go ahead and go to basketball now, gentlemen, if you'd like. All right, so career you didn't see that you wish you could have. There's a lot to choose from here because talk about a different game. We touched on this. No three-point shot way back when. You can go all the way back to the literal peach baskets before there were baskets. Chocolate Thunder, breaking backboards, that kind of thing. What do you got, Dave?
Well, I think the easy one for me is Chamberlain because everybody talks. I mean, today, if you talk about top 10 players, for sure, if you talk top 5 centers, Chamberlain, if he's not number 1, he's 2 or 3. And those people that saw him and then saw Shaq and people say how good Shaq was, they just kind of shake their heads and walk away. They're like, yeah, Shaq was a beast. That's true, but Chamberlain could do anything he wanted on the court, so let's not talk about it. So it would be Chamberlain would be fun to watch. I didn't pay enough attention to Moses Malone. I think I would like to learn more about him. Dr. J, while popular, I'd like to watch the basketball player, but guys like the Iceman, George Gervin, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be fun to understand how he earned that nickname? Like having the Jordan documentary on Sidney Moncrief, or players like that when the NBA wasn't all it is today. Because I mean, people that don't pay attention, the NBA before Magic, the NBA was kind of a second-rate league. Like Oscar Robertson, how often do you know what Robinson did?
Stop talking. This is the second topic in a row where somebody talked long enough to take my option. But I love that Dave is completely Showtime Lakers guy and I'm Celtics guy because he says NBA before Magic and I say NBA before Bird. But I agree with what you said, particularly to the Lakers, because you mentioned not paying attention to Moses Malone. When I got into basketball, Kareem was old. He was a factor, but he was old. It was about to become Magic's team. I wish I would have seen Kareem maybe as Lou Alcindor.
Yeah, I think that people that watched Tim Duncan the last couple of years are in that same boat, right? Because we hear how good Tim Duncan was, but at the end, he was just kind of people gave him the opportunities to score. He didn't necessarily take them. Abdul-Jabbar was that way. They knew that he could come across the paint and throw a hook shot, so they gave him the ball at that spot. It would have been fun to see when he could do whatever he wanted on the court.
No, I think you're right. And then, Kareem was one of the names that I had in my head as a possible player. And I'm surprised that Brian didn't go here. I'm going to steal one of Brian's guys, Bill Russell.
Bill Russell.
With the with the Boston Celtics. I mean, the guy's got, more rings than digits at this point. He's just did it all, and he was the guy. He wasn't afraid to let you know that he could do it all as well. And another guy, Pistol Pete Maravich. And George Mikan in Minnesota obviously was a completely different game at that point. But I just think it'd be kind of neat to see a Minneapolis Lakers game at some point. To see a good basketball team in Minnesota would be interesting.
Isn't it?
What do you mean? Wait a minute. You can see a good basketball team in Minnesota at least 41 times a year during a normal team. It's whoever the Timberwolves play. Go ahead.
Isn't it interesting how different generations have, their idea of the best basketball player or the greatest winner? Because before Jordan, the pinnacle of NBA winner was Bill Russell.
Absolutely.
I mean, and guys from that generation, there's not even, they won't even listen to it. Jordan, he had all kinds of help, but when, before he became Michael Jordan, it was, but Russell did this. Russell did that. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who said, yep, Jordan's great, but he never had to play Chamberlain. You know what I mean? Russell was always the best because of something.
Well, and it's interesting how basketball seems to wear that mantra, if you will, better than any other sport. Because I think in football, we did it with Montana for a long time because he won so often. Before Brady, it was always, yeah, but he's not Joe. Well, there are a lot of quarterbacks statistically that I'll put on a level with Joe, but with rings, it's really only Brady that can compare and surpass.
Yep. And that was the Bradshaw argument. Before Brady, it was, well, Montana, but Bradshaw has 4 rings.
And Bradshaw had the steel curtain.
Yeah, and Bradshaw had another guy whose personality has carried him along through the years, like Namath. Namath's numbers don't get looked at because of his personality. Bradshaw's numbers don't get scrutinized because of his.
Well, Terry Bradshaw is everything we talked about with Twins players that we like more because they broadcast. Everybody and their mom knows Terry Bradshaw because of Sunday mornings now.
Yep, I agree. But there's in the past for basketball, there are so many interesting moments as well. Following Ewing after the NBA jimmied the draft, seeing that San Antonio team that got David Robinson, and just when his career was coming to the end, got Tim Duncan. It's like quarterbacks in Green Bay, power forward centers in San Antonio.
Absolutely. The only thing that I learned from this is just like our fantasy drafts, I got to stop going third because I ended up with all my options taken. Because going into this, my 2 choices were Bill Russell for obvious reasons. Checked my closet for Celtics garb galore. And then when
I'm going to say real
drafted,
quick, you had an opportunity to talk before I brought up Bill Russell.
I did. I jumped into something Dave said, yeah. And actually, Dave, what I was going to tell you, you brought up Sidney Moncrief. The only reason I knew to dislike Sidney Moncrief, much like to like Tony Oliva, everybody knows my disdain for Wisconsin. My dad basically told me to not like Jack Sikma and not like Sidney Moncrief because they were Milwaukee Bucks. So that was bred into me early. And you're right. So if I didn't take the bull by the horns and just answer the question, because going into it, my first 2 basketball choices were Russell and then the Big O. The Big O and Jordan were the only ones to make the kind of immediate statistical impact early in their careers that they did. So if you don't know much about the Big O, Google it. Just don't click on Harry Met Sally or any of the other links you might get if you Google the Big O. But I digress.
Oof. I have a question for you guys. What is the first pair of tennis shoes that you bought because of a player?
I would think that for Topher, it's going to be skates. So let's use attorney talk for him. Let's rephrase the question.
Well, tennis shoes. I had Air Jordans when
I did too, but it had nothing. He was not why. My bad ankles and good high tops were the reasons why. Larry Bird didn't have shoes. KG that I know of didn't have shoes. I never did it for a player.
Larry Bird had the original black canvas or black Converse, leather black Converse.
He had Converse, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can honestly say that I didn't wear those.
My first pair of tennis shoes specifically because of the player, and it's a player who I really like, was the X-Man. Remember
Xavier McDaniel? Yeah.
Yep.
Former Nick and Celtic and a lot of other things. Supersonic.
Supersonics, man. But his tennis shoes had plastic sides. And so at that point I was doing a lot of weightlifting. And so those plastic sides helped prevent ankle injuries. That was the selling bit. But yeah, the X-Man, tough guy.
All right, so I like the question you gave with the shoes, but I'm going to swing in a different direction and we'll wrap this up because it went a lot longer than even I imagined. I think it got fun for all three of us. Baseball gloves. When you get your first one as a kid, there's a really good chance that somebody's signature is on the palm. Do you remember who it was for you?
Well, I remember the first one I bought, but I'm sure I can go out and check the catcher's mitt. But the first one I bought was a George Brett third base glove.
Man, going last is not going to be fun again. Spoiler alert. Go ahead, Toph.
I had a Nolan Ryan glove, and then my first catcher's glove was actually Joe Torre autographed.
Ooh.
Nice. First one I bought, Dave. We are not this close in age, but apparently we were meant to be friends a long time ago. First one I bought, a Brown Wilson George Brett. I've never stormed out of the dugout for any Pine Tar reason, but wearing George Brett on my left hand was a big deal.
Yep. No, I agree. That was the last time my grandfather and I went to a store, and he said, "Yeah, buy a glove. I'll pick it up. Which one do you want?" And so, when you're a kid, you have all these options. It takes you like 6 weeks to figure out which one you want to buy, because now you actually can. And it was the George Brett glove, and I still have it someplace.
All right, quick follow-up because I'm having way too much fun. So there were the, factory-made autographs. Who's the first player you had actually sign your glove? Anybody got a memory of that one?
I'm just trying to think of my first actual autograph. I didn't do that.
Yeah, I never had a player autograph a baseball glove. That's one thing I didn't do.
All right, how about a ball? Because maybe I'm the only one who had autographs on my glove because I knew I was going to be done using it. Dave, I think I told you this story because we met him at Wade. Kevin Tapani did it for me his rookie year, and I had surgery about 2 days later, so it was the best thing ever. And Jim Cott was announcing during Tapani's rookie year. I didn't know who that was by physical feature. My dad did, and threw my glove right to him and said, "Sign it." He did.
Dave didn't do a whole lot of autograph stuff. So honest, I kid you not.
And you're friends with Ted Keefe? I'm surprised that didn't rub off.
My first autographed baseball is autographed by the first Little League team that I coached.
That's actually pretty cool.
I have a bunch of them now. I've collected, in the last 15 years. But when I was a kid, I just played. I didn't
That's actually pretty cool because the last baseball I have autographed was everybody that was at my bachelor party signed a baseball because that's where we went. So that's pretty cool. Stories like that are neat too. Toph, what do you got?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't remember specifically my first autograph, but I think it probably came about in 1992 at the grocery store. I signed up to win a Twins fantasy camp with Frosted Flakes, right? And I won. I got to go down to the Metrodome and do this little day fantasy camp.
Wait a minute. So Dave, Topher was winning things even when he was like 6, just so you know.
Right?
And it was 8, but so at 8 years old, I'm on the Metrodome field. We got, and this is 92, right after the 91 World Series, right? The Twins are everything.
92, a great team that went nowhere.
Right. So we get to go, we're on the field, jump up against the outfield wall, pretend we're Kirby Puckett and all that fun stuff. And we got to meet Mike Tremblay and Al Newman. So those would be the first two guys. Those are the guys the Twins rolled out for us. Really big time players, right? But those would be the two guys that probably were my first two autographs. Was getting.
Hey, that's a little bit like the Winter Caravan these days. I remember the first one I took my wife to. We got a baseball autograph by Renee Tassoni. Beat that one.
Oh, outstanding.
And the only reason it meant anything to either one of us is my wife and my first date together was in the Legends Club at Target Field. Shocking. Renee Tassoni went deep twice. So we said, well, I guess it's kind of fitting. And I think Renee Tassoni might have had 4 or 5 career home runs. So we saw a good percentage of those.
So, Toph, here's a question for you. When you were working with the Huskies and Al Newman would roll into town with the Rocks, did you ever bring that up?
No, I never talked to him again about that. I'm sure he doesn't remember I'm sure it was one of those things where the Twins said, hey, you got to do this. And he probably wasn't pumped to go meet a bunch of kids that win a cereal contest.
No, but, I don't imagine he was pumped, but I bet he would find it interesting to see that you were still in the game.
So you're saying you don't think Al Newman thought the idea was great, like Frosted Flakes probably did?
It was definitely Frosted Flakes promotion. It was pretty cool.
Wow, right.
Yeah, I had to try to do Tony the Tiger a little bit. It's interesting though because we have run into a lot of, childhood icons at Wade, and it's different to suddenly have to remember to be an adult. I know we have a friend who probably could take that to heart a few more times. But, running across Kevin Tapani, Joe Vavra, Al Newman, Rich Amaral, Steve Bono, I got absolutely
Steve
enamored
Bono.
with. And I would mention
Yep.
Steve Bono's NFL accolades on every broadcast to the point where the first time he came to Duluth, he got in Wade and said, "All right, where's this Brian guy who knows my career better than I do? I got to meet him." So sometimes being a huge sports geek, any kid out there who thinks they are one, it's not bad.
No, it's not bad. In fact, it's the opposite of not bad. Being that kid is great.
All right, so real quick, because we've only got about 5 minutes left in the first hour. So, Dave, I think we're going to save your opening topic that we were going to do today for probably next week. But the other side to this question is we've got sports that should be happening that aren't. Whose career did you want to watch continue to develop that you're being robbed of right now that will take football out of this because we hope they'll still come?
Well, that's an awesome question. I hadn't given that any thought. I mean, if it's the kids, if it's the young players, it's Vlad Jr. for me because he came in last year with so much over the top hype, and he was good. And if he was just a rookie, you'd have said, "Oh, they're a great rookie year." But because it was Vlad Jr., he kind of disappointed. I'd love to see Vlad Jr. continue to grow. If we're talking about middle of their career guys that it's time for them to take a step, it's our number one starting pitcher. And I'm not sure it's even close. It's him or Buxton, but it's J.O. Barrios makes the move to an ace. I think he was going to do that.
All right, so Dave covered baseball. Go ahead, Toph.
Well, it's going to surprise you a little bit, I think. But I'm thinking more guys
Pete
that
Alonso.
are either at the prime or later in their career. No, well, they have covered baseball, so we're going to put Pete Alonso at rookie year.
We all get a sport by sport chance.
Well,
I thought you were going to
obviously,
stay with baseball and do Pete
Jake
Alonso.
DeGrom going for a three-peat.
Three-peat, obviously, is the best pitcher in the game.
Yeah, easily the best pitcher in the game.
You could say that his talent is to the max right now.
Yeah, obviously Jake DeGrom. But when I think of specifically of the COVID situation and what it's kind of robbing us of, believe it or not, LeBron James and the Lakers and as he's trying to continue to solidify his legacy, he's towards the tail end of his career. But that was a team that was playing really well, and all of a sudden things are going obviously pear-shaped. No one will ever know what happens in the 2020 season.
Did you send him a text, Brian?
No, I did not.
That's all me.
That's his hot basketball takes. He just waits in the weeds.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, so I'm gonna go back to baseball because Dave's right. With Vlad Jr., I was pretty much on that bandwagon too, but I'm gonna go further. I just want to watch the Toronto Blue Jays because we've spent so much time talking about when we were kids. Well, they've got Vlad's kid, they've got Biggio's kid. I believe they've got Dante Bichette's kid.
Yep.
Just go ahead and roll out everybody's offspring who I looked up to as a kid. That's the Toronto Blue Jays right now.
I wonder if and I think the answer to this is obviously yes, but they have to be looking for pro players' kids because for some reason it would be fun to find out what that was. But Toph's right when it comes to basketball. I'm not a LeBron guy. All right, so I like the human, but I don't like the over focus on him. But
I don't like the embellishment. He gets breathed on, and you think he tore his ACL.
I would like to see John Walls come back. Because he's a speed player coming back from a knee injury. I'd like to see that Bulls team continue to gel because Zach LaVine's one of my favorite players. It would be interesting to see how good Pop is the rest of the season with the San Antonio team that is, doesn't have the talent it used to have.
I would like to see if the Kawhi sweepstakes panned out enough because the Lakers have their own glitz. They have LeBron to add to that glitz. It'd be something to me if the other LA team ended up being the headliner. Quite frankly, locally, I think the Bucks think they were the best chance to overtake the Lakers. Are we being robbed of the Giannis dynasty maybe starting?
We might be because, in the NBA, it is recruit superstars every single day of the week by other superstars. They're trying to get Giannis out of Milwaukee. And it would be fun to see the success that they might have.
Well, I'm glad you said that because this Jordan documentary, everybody's talking about, well, I haven't seen anything that cements why he's the best in the game over LeBron. Yes, you did. When they lost to the Pistons, Jordan hit the weight room and held his team accountable, and they eventually surpassed the Pistons. LeBron would have called Isaiah and said, "Hey, you want to build a super team?" That's the difference.
Yeah, that is
You're not
an
wrong.
absolute difference.
Yeah,
He wouldn't have called
I'm
Isaiah though, because it sounds like Michael would have wanted to tear Isaiah apart anyway.
There's
this
that.
talks a little bit about the different eras as well, right? I mean, because is there any type of that hatred anymore in pro sports as much? It's not especially basketball, where the guys are changing teams all over the place. But there's a guy. I mean, you were talking about baseball getting things going. What Josh Donaldson? How many home runs would he have had right now in that lineup? And
Yeah,
getting things going.
Yep. I think if you go to the Twins, it's either him or Sano. It's one of the corner infielders to see if the big money spent paid off, or the biggest potential power guy in your lineup continues to flourish. Because every time we get a great sign of here he comes, he gets hurt or he regresses and goes into strikeout mode. I just want to see it, because for the 18 millionth year in a row, it's what are Buxton and Sano going to do? And here go the Twins with them.
Yeah, you said something, Brian, a long time ago. And what if, because they didn't actually play with that team, what if the contracts are different, and all of a sudden, Josh Donaldson signed here, but now he can go elsewhere because we didn't actually play the season.
Right, and I don't think that's true of the long terms, but I do think 1-year deals, the Homer Baileys, the Rich Hills, you could run into that.
That's such a different time, man. Who would have thought we'd ever say something like that? Sign a 1-year deal and not be an injury reclamation like Joel Zumaya was, but sign a 1-year deal and never see the player. Sign a 1-year major league deal and never see the player.
All right, close with hockey because it's wheelhouse for you two, especially, and I'm learning. For me, it's Kevin Fiala, because his team is supposedly in a rebuild. Not everywhere. He appears to be the spot where they're not. I wish we could see that finish, because if he finished strong, I think they do too, and I think they're a playoff team.
And this is one of those times it sucks to go second. I think Fiala's the answer to that.
Yeah, he was on such a tear when the season came to an abrupt ending, or a pause, I should say, because that hasn't officially ended yet. But I mean, that's obviously a difficult spot to be in, because he was on such a tear, and the Wild were actually playing really well. And a guy like Zach Parise, who's towards the tail end of his career, was playing well with Fiala as well. And we never know these moments, and the number of playoff runs for a lot of guys are getting down there, and who knows what's left in the tank.
Right. # Nelson Cruz. How many years do we have left of him? He's not exactly a spring chicken, but he stays in better shape than apparently everybody does.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a fun topic.
It is. Too much we're being robbed of. High school students certainly are. We're going to pay homage to them when we come back with hour number 2. Stay right here.